Welcome back to the XL250 build. It's been an interesting few days. I have been working on the lower fork yoke, stanchion, whatever they're called. And in the last video I did, I highlighted the fact that I was concerned about the tube being bent, which it clearly is. After my moan on YouTube on the last video, a very kind gentleman, a subscriber of mine who goes by the name of Chucky1, whose real name is Andy, sent me his old yoke, very kindly sent it to me, which had this replacement tube on it, which was straight. The reason I didn't just use the replacement one is that it's damaged, which is the reason why Mr. Chucky1 had replaced it himself. He also very kindly included the steering lock bracket, which was on my wish list of parts to find. So at some point I have to work out a way of safely removing this bracket, because it has snap-off security bolts on it. So I've got a couple of ideas on how to do that. So yeah, so we're now in the position where I've fitted the tube. It was a lot of banging with a brass rod, but in reverse. These are incredibly tight on here, and it's probably taken me a good half an hour, I suppose, of gentle tapping, and it's just slowly driven it in. One of my concerns actually was that there's a flat here that has to marry up with a flat on the aluminium part, and it was just making sure that was going down straight. And actually I did quite a good job of lining that up by eye, bearing in mind that it's probably a good 2 inches, if not further away, when you first start, and once it starts going there's absolutely no adjustments you can make. So once again I'd like to thank Andy for his donation of the part. It really has got me out of a hole, and I can't wait to get this back in the bike when the frame comes back from powder coating, and yeah, it's getting there. So the next job is to fit the taper roller bearing, but I must remember before I do that to fit 2 items, one of them being the rubber seal that goes at the bottom, and the other is the flat washer that goes underneath that. So yeah, so the next job is to make sure that those 2 parts are on, and then I think we might end up using the brass rod to hammer the bearing seat back into place, because these really are very tight tolerances, and I guess in the factory they'd have a press that did it, but I don't have a press. As a side note, you know it's been hard work when you discover that your workstation includes every tool you own, including diving weights. It's always bad news if the diving weights are out. My brass rod has flared out at both ends. I've roughly hacksawed off the other end, and now I'm going to try and get a neat finish using the Bodgermatic 5mm, which involves the pillar drill and my hacksaw. This may fail miserably. That looks pretty darn good. So no more mushrooming. I'll do the other end now, and I won't bother showing you. A boring interlude, I know, but at least I have a nice flush, slightly shorter brass rod again. Right, that is the seal on there. Next, sorry, that's the washer. Next is the rubber seal, which goes over the top. And then we have the race, and this is the bit I'm almost certain is going to need some love taps to get it down. Put a bit of grease on there, a little bit. But that's why we have the brass rod, to help us get it down there without damaging the steel. They're going to help or hinder? This is the reason why I cut the ends of this bar, was so that I could have a nice sharp lip on it to help tap the race down. Might bit easier doing it on the floor because it's less prone to bounce, unlike the desk. Now, one of the things I did when fitting the aluminium part was I put marks on here just to make sure that it was actually moving, that it wasn't just making noise. I will spare you the pain of this, but showing a huge amount of movement on there. About now, press would be quite useful. Okay, yeah, we've got some movement. It is working its way down there, but as usual, it's just millimetre by millimetre. And be careful not to strike the threads at the top of the shaft as well, because that would be disastrous if I damage those. Okay, so we've moved about 4 or 5 millimetres. So you get the idea. I'm going to carry on tapping. It will take a while. So there we go. The taper roller bearing lower race is back in position to pretty much where I want it. I've measured its height against the existing ball bearing, but I don't even know if they correlate at all, so I won't know until I sort of test fit this back into the bike. Well, I've got this broken lower thingy on the bench. It's a good opportunity to take the old steering lock off. I was expecting a fight on those. And just start to think about ideas about removing this lower bracket. My first thought was to see if I can get my, I keep calling it a Dremel tool. It's not a Dremel tool, it's a small rotary tool, but it's easier to call it a Dremel because everyone knows what you mean. See if I can just file slots in there and unscrew them with a standard screwdriver. Option 2 is to get a mate to weld nuts onto the tops of these and then unbolt them, but I'm worried about the heat. This is actually in really good condition, so if I can keep it in its original paint, that would be a real bonus. Save me any effort, and it will be one of the few original parts that's left unmolested by me on the bike. Obviously I'm going to keep these screws because I don't have a set of those, so they're going to go in the new lock that I've already got. Yeah, so I might start with the Dremel and just see if these aren't too hard to grind in slots and be able to unscrew them by hand. Okay, so far I have tried to grind a slot into this remains of this security bolt. I tried with a conventional screwdriver, but it just wasn't going to happen. So it was in danger of stripping out the top of the screw. So I am now going to give it a go with this impact driver, and I don't know how successful this is going to be, but the slot I've created is not brilliant. Right, here goes. That has actually moved. Oh, look at that. Try a more conventional screwdriver. See if that's now. Hey, success. I've cut a second slot in the second screw, and hopefully it's deep enough to be able to get this to come out. Yes. Right, my intention is to reuse all the bits that come off this, which means the bits that I've just ground into to get off, but the idea I'm hoping is to make a more permanent, better fitting slot. Okay, good. When I reuse those, I will use thread lock on them to make sure they don't come undone.